Republicans plan to retire or seek another office in 2020. Well, only 3 House Democrats have announced they won't run again. July was officially the hottest month that humans have ever recorded, and today is the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. Harriet Washington will be joining us today to discuss environmental racism and its assault on the American mind. And in the second half, we'll be taking your calls after we speak with Councilmember Ben Kallos. Full show. Stay tuned. Welcome to the program, everybody. I am happy to be here with you on this lovely Tuesday morning. It's 73 degrees outside.
It's great. A little humid, but it's great.
The perfect, most beautiful weather. Going up to 83 degrees today. No rain in sight. Hottest day we are looking forward to is Thursday at 88. Tomorrow's going to be 87 with thunderstorms. Now, yesterday I went to bed and they were saying thunderstorms all day. I wake up today. Oh, no, that's tomorrow. So I don't know, I think they're having trouble predicting the weather, and I will bet my bottom dollar that we can get a guest on here to talk about that.
Or they'll say no, and then the thunderstorms will happen as soon as you leave here this morning.
Exactly. So that's what they're saying now. I'm just, bring everything you have for every contingency so you can make the New York schlep even worse than it already is. Anyway, we have good news today. It is I guess it's good news, but it's the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act today.
Yeah, happy birthday to you. Yeah, so on this date in 19...
No, go more. Do more singing.
When's your birthday?
January.
Oh, okay, we'll do it then.
Okay.
When's your birthday, Alana?
April 9th.
Oh, we missed that. When's your birthday?
March 30th.
Oh,
Michael? All right, it's just down to Michael. When's your birthday?
Oh, we need to get some people on the staff. No, we don't need any Scorpios.
We'll ask Harriet when her birthday is.
We'll ask Harriet.
So anyway, today is the anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. Was passed in 1965, and very few people were unaware of the things that were going on at that time. You had to have a poll tax if you were black in order to register. You would have to answer questions like, how many bubbles are there in a bar of soap?
Because that's important to democracy.
It definitely is. And so you ended up with all these jurisdictions, and not all of them were in the South. They were in the North, in the far West, and everywhere. And King and the campaign had pushed and pushed, and, it was the police attack in Selma that drove the final passage of the bill, because there had been all this resistance, but that had happened and it was so bad that finally some action was taken. And it was covered by mainstream
media, let's say. It was covered in the media, and America got to see it, as opposed to what the media is currently doing.
Yeah. And even though the reporters were forced to be a long distance away, they used big lenses, and they still caught it all. So, So at any rate, the bill was...
Especially we're right here today with all the voter disenfranchisement that's going on.
That's the whole thing, that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And so there was a part of the law that just covered the whole country and said that you couldn't put in special rules or poll taxes or anything. And then there was a second part of the law that dealt with places that had already had problems, like poll taxes or any place where half of the eligible voters weren't registered. So all of that got passed, and it began to start the wave of black politicians who began to become elected mayors and council people in other kinds of cities. Then immediately the right and the Supreme Court went on the attack, gradually trying to whittle it away to the point where we're now facing all the same kinds of things: ballot access, cuts on early voting, pushing back ID requirements, and felony disenfranchisement. 6 million people who, and some with misdemeanors, are now being pushed off the rolls. So, all these years later, we're kind of back where we started.
Yeah, sometimes I have I'm trying to offer a slight hopeful thought, because sometimes if you look at the big picture about why we're back where we started, I try to think about it because it gives the opportunity for people to choose to work for good, because evil's always on the march. So, the work that you do when you're working for good.
Well, Frederick Douglass said the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And every time these things happen, a half generation kind of lay back and say, we're good.
Just like with the reproductive rights that are happening and the rollbacks on that are happening now. So we're seeing that. Yeah, we're not good. So Good morning. We're not good. That's what's going on here. So this weekend, as you know, there were a spate of gun violence deaths across our country, including 33 deaths in Chicago. I guess they don't, that didn't make the news cycle because it wasn't one white guy with a gun at a Walmart all of these things are important, and I think we need to keep them all at the forefront. 33 people, that's a lot in one city.
It definitely is.
Yeah, so it's important to keep that in mind. And people are trying to put pressure on Mitch McConnell, who just refuses to do anything, basically. If we're waiting for Congress to do something, history being our guide, we're going to be waiting a long time. The gun control advocacy group that was named for when Gabby Giffords got shot popped up, says that you can track every mass shooting that's happened in the last 5 or 6 years and look to see what Congress has done. The answer is probably nothing. Congress's only response to the shootings in places like Parkland or Las Vegas or Sandy Hook in Connecticut is basically to fix gaps in the federal background check registry, but this does not help anything. And the reason is that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans have successfully blocked any meaningful gun measures from becoming law over the past 20 years. John Boehner, remember him? Crying alcoholic orange. Our pre-orange.
Orange.
Pre-orange orange.
The old orange.
And Paul Ryan, thank God we're rid of that guy. Both Republican House speakers also refused to put gun control measures to a vote when Republicans had the majority in the House. But in particular, the barrier has been in the Senate, where 60 votes are needed to overcome the filibuster. Even when Senate Democrats have won a majority, they've needed Republican help to reach 60, and they've never got it. Now, this could change as Senate Judiciary Chair Lindsey Graham announced Monday he's reached a deal with Richard Blumenthal. He's a Democratic senator doing a lot of good work out there to jointly introduce legislation involving red flag laws that allow police, with the consent of a judge, to seize an individual's weapons in advance if they are deemed to be a threat to themselves and others. Okay, red flags laws are great, but what about how Australia did a major gun buyback in their state, in their country after, like it was an enforced gun buyback in their country after the latest mass shooting. And also, now Obama is out there. Did you see what he said? He
No.
said, you're not following Obama? Type?
I missed him.
Oh, no. Well, he's...
I'll catch him. I'll catch his Netflix movies.
Oh, yeah, I know. Well, maybe he'll make one out of this show. Obama is out there saying, he's talking about what we need in terms of gun laws and gun registrations, and that we should actually be buyback and taking back guns. And I'm like, oh my God, Obama really is coming for people's guns, just like the right wing has been putting out there. Isn't it a slightly, okay, he had a Republican Senate, whatever, but isn't it just a little bit like, kind of like an Al Gore thing and a Obama thing? When they were at the head of power, they did not as much as maybe they could have. And then they get out and they're like, we need to do this thing. I'm like, you guys were the presidents. And the vice president. And Gore was the president, but he didn't get to be the president.
Even though he invented the internet, I just don't know why he couldn't get elected.
He did. Well, he did get elected, but then we gave it to Bush with the Supreme Court. So there was that. Anyway, you're listening to Waking Up. I'm Julianna Forlano. Very happy to be here with you on this beautiful morning. It is 73 degrees outside and mostly, now it's partly cloudy. I guess it's cleared up since we had started our discussion this morning. Going up to 83. Just a pretty much a beautiful day today. They are not expecting any rain. Yesterday when I went to bed, as I said, rain. Today, no rain. Did you finish your thoughts on the Voting Rights Act? I think we got slightly derailed.
No, I think so. The only thing is that folks really need to stay on it because through the years, but the Supreme Court has been trying to whittle it away. And at one point, they tried to say that the discrimination had to be purposeful. Now, how are you going to prove that all this stuff was done for racially purposeful reasons?
Yeah, how are you going to prove it?
You can't prove it. You have to get inside the minds of these folks. So at that point,
legally, to prove it, you need something specific.
Yeah, you'd have to find the smoking gun. No pun intended.
Too bad they didn't have 8chan back then, where people literally wrote down their intent and put it on the internet.
Yeah. And then the last one that people are fighting now is in 2013. the Supreme Court rolled back the coverage rules, which let a lot of the states off the hook as former violators. And so now there's a big push, and hopefully, we get somebody on, maybe Color of Change or somebody who's been really pushing these movements to try to get this stuff pushed back. Because if this stuff is still in place, no matter what people are talking about in the upcoming election, it could get undermined.
Exactly. So it's all a horse and pony show unless our voting is secure. We got Russia, we've got Republicans. Of course, they don't care about Russian interference. They're like, oh, good, they're interfering in a way we like. Anyway, this week there's a lot of great stuff going on. The weekend's tragedy marks obviously the largest slaughter of Latinos by gunfire in a domestic hate-based incident in modern U.S. history. Those attacks in El Paso, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio, killed more Americans in 24 hours than the number of American troops killed in Afghanistan in 2017 and 2018 combined. Voto Latino, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, Move On, and the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, and the AFT, American Federation of Teachers, that's a lot of people, will host a joint rally with a coalition of national civil rights and gun rights prevention groups today, Tuesday, August 6th at noon. If you're around in D.C. and you're listening, that's going to be big. It's also going to be live streamed all over the internet. I believe act.tv is going to be live streaming it. But it's something to keep our eye on. They're going to be at Lafayette Square in D.C., demanding that Donald Trump stop his racist, violence-inducing attacks on immigrants and communities of color, and urging the Senate to pass gun reform legislation already approved by the House, including the H.R. 8 Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2019. You can join and make your voices heard, and also join via the internets and make your voices heard via the internets. The important thing to talk about here is to, that all the discussion of impeachment have been kind of sidelined because of the gun violence issue. And the gun violence issue can easily be tied back to Donald Trump's racist and hateful rhetoric. And that should be a reason for impeachment itself. So we should not let the idea that, whether he diddled with Russia or not, the Mueller report is not the only reason to impeach this president.
Yeah, I want to throw something in because it's great that the unions are getting involved, because one of the issues that's been overlooked in all of this is the fact that many of these people are disgruntled because of their unemployment, underemployment, their financial problems. And so that situation is causing them to blame the immigrants for the problems that they're having. And so one of the things that I'm hoping the unions will call on is that the minimum wage be raised and that jobs not be sent overseas, because if we can avoid the problem at that level, there'll be less disgruntled people shooting up malls.
Exactly, and that organized labor be allowed to flourish and be a thing, that we don't undermine organized labor. Hopefully these folks will see it. Maybe they should start posting on 8chan, which I guess is down now. So I guess you have to go step it back a little and go to 4chan, or maybe they'll hear our show and wake up, because that's the name of the show. The whole point here. Oh, by the way, right here, 4.5, right here back in our town, we want to do some reporting here on the Williams pipeline. 4.5 years ago, Cuomo banned fracking, but now the oil and gas industry, as you know, is back trying to sneak through a new form of fracking using liquefied petroleum gas instead of water. Very serious. They are, I believe they have to run that through pipelines. I believe they dropped a pipeline under the far part of Flatbush Avenue under the cover of night when I was living out there. And those are the pipelines that explode. So most busiest street in possibly, I think, the whole U.S. when I looked it up before, Flatbush Avenue, pipeline underneath, exploding pipeline, potentially exploding, very dangerous.
Are they still trying to put that pipeline under the harbor, New York Harbor?
That I don't know. That's a good question. But the truth is there's no safe fracking, whether it's pipeline explosions or things, the harbor getting destroyed, or digging up the harbor, which has toxic sediment on the bottom. I mean, so many people were swimming this weekend along those shores of Long Island, Rockaway, Coney Island. That would all be toxic if they dig it up, not only to people, but to the animals in there. But anyway, this is why we banned it in the first place. Now it's up to make sure Cuomo stands strong. His Department of Environmental Conservation is shortly deciding how broad the scope of this environmental review for the process of the Williams pipeline will be. Groups have submitted 25,000 fact-based public comments urging the Department of Environmental Conservation to deny the pipeline. But we know that the ultimate decision maker is Cuomo. So they're doing a rally this afternoon in front of Cuomo's New York City office. That's today. Woo! If you can't make it, you can call the governor at 877-235-6537. Again, call the governor, 877-235-6535, and tell him to reject the new fracking scheme. I like making calls from the show, but we're so early that we usually get the voicemail. When we were on at 6 o'clock, the show.
We should do that live.
That's what I'm saying.
We should just,
but they
even if
usually
we get the
machine.
voicemail, it's okay.
Let's do it in the second half.
Oh,
And
when and
it's
where?
at noon.
Okay, great.
Actually, I'm sorry. It's Wednesday at noon, not today. Wednesday, tomorrow. At Cuomo's office, which is 633 3rd Avenue in New York. 633 3rd Avenue, Wednesday from 12 to 1. Get there, bring your sign, eat your lunch, make your voice heard. You're listening to Waking Up. I'm Julianna Forlano. We are in our pledge drive, continuing to raise money for the station here. And today, as a gift for you, we have a book called A Terrible Thing to Waste, Environmental Racism and Its Assault on the American Mind. Now, I have read parts of this book. I try to read the whole thing, but we give away a lot of books. So literally, it's a challenge. I'm almost done. This thing is crazy. What I didn't get to is, what do we do to stop this problem?
Right.
That's at the end of the book. We're going to ask her that because she's coming on. Harriet Washington is also the author of Medical Apartheid. This book is about how environmentalism, it's basically a book for anyone who cares about a just and healthy future for all Americans. She gets to the critical questions that are at the heart of racism and inequality in health, income, social welfare, and power. Is when we offer premiums like the thing we was just offered right before this show, the thing that cleans out your water. It's a water filter and all kinds of health related things. This is the book that tells you exactly what you need to know about what's being poisoned, who's being poisoned, and what we can do politically, not just to save our own. She has, I haven't got there, so she's going to speak to it. She has solutions that are both political and individual in the back of the book. But first, she lays out the problem. Did you know this? Did you know that a PCB concentration of 5 parts per billion in a pregnant woman's blood, now that is like one drop of water in 118 bathtubs of water. Not the small tubs, not the small New York apartment-sized tubs, the big ones with the claw feet. That can give rise to, adverse effects on the fetal brain, IQ deficits. And who's getting this stuff in their water? People who live in marginalized places. And by the way, she also gives some shocking statistics. Poor whites who make less than $10,000 a year are still in less toxic places than middle-income African Americans who make between 50 and 60 grand. It's not, the money can't protect you.
That's great you brought that up, because that's the one that jumped out at me, and I had it written down here that one hit me. Well, no surprise, but she's documented it.
We have several copies of these books, but this is not an unlimited source here. We don't have an unlimited amount of these books. So I would say get on the line and get this gift how much is it, Alana? I'm missing the thingy. Hold on a second. As a gift, if you're able to pledge today, at the amount of $50, we will be able to give you this book as a gift. This is a non-misser. 516-620-3602. 516-620-3602 is our pledge line. Give the number 2 WBAI.org is how you can do it online. We're going to be speaking to Harriet Washington in a brief moment after this musical break. We will be right back. But get the book now, because once you hear her talk,
you can ask intelligent questions.
Well, that, but also you're going to want the book, and we have a limited amount, so now's the time. 516-620-3602. You're listening to WBAI, Waking Up with Julianna and King, and we'll be right back. assistant producer, Alana Levinson, sitting to my far right. Harriet Washington has been expertly covering the intersection of race, medicine, health, and ethics for years. This is the book we were just talking about. It's urgent. It's called A Terrible Thing to Waste, Environmental Racism and Its Assault on the American Mind. Continues her important work with an indictment of the notion of hereditary intelligence and a thorough examination of how environmental racism drives the black-white IQ gap. Harriet Washington joins us today to talk about what can be done to remedy the toxic effects of environmental racism on marginalized communities. Harriet, thanks for joining us on the program today.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Harriet, your book scared the pants off me.
Oh?
Well, the thing about
Yes.
how a lead paint chip smaller than a fingernail can send a toddler into a coma, and 1/10 of that will lower his or her IQ forever. This is
Yes.
a national emergency we're talking about here.
It's a national emergency which has been transpiring now for decades. So, yes, we have to do something about it now. Mm-hmm. And as I point out in the book, specifically, we have to stop the rollback of protections by the EPA. We were actually starting to make progress. Not necessarily dramatic progress, but meaningful progress until the current administration came in and immediately put these things in motion. And the fact that we have now decided, as a country under this administration, to stop this progress does make it into a crisis now.
Well, one of the things
because if we don't,
yes,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
Oh, I wasn't going to. I had nothing really more to say.
I was reading in your book,
right.
you document a lot of the things in here that just the last president did. President Obama was putting regulations. Now, Republicans hate regulations. They want freedom to pollute and to kill you and to make your children less intelligent. Before we get to the politics of it, let's talk about what's happening, basically. You have three parts in the book. The first part is called Color-Coded Intelligence. How has politics shrouded the truth about our nation's IQ?
The first thing to understand is that we tend to look at certain disciplines as being pure and untouched by politics. That's not the case. One of those disciplines is science. How often have you heard someone say, it's true, it's science? But the reality is science is only as accurate and only as true as the people who practice it. And the people who practice it can be very flawed and can have very strong political agendas. When it comes to intelligence, the conversation has been driven by people with very strong political agendas. Hereditarians who believe that IQ is inherited and is color-coded, with people of color having lower IQs and therefore they think lower intelligence. These people have agendas. If you look, they're funded by the Pioneer Fund, which is a eugenic organization, frankly, devoted to the primacy and welfare of white people, native-born whites, they say. So they're funded by these people, and they often have agendas. I mean, Jason Richwine, who left Harvard after writing his doctoral thesis about how Hispanics were lower in intelligence and more prone to criminality than were other people.
And we're hearing that in President Trump's rhetoric. Oh, Obama, they're all criminals.
Yeah.
He must have read the report.
But Richwine, who's accepted as a scientist, his agenda was to bar Hispanic immigration because he immediately wrote papers to the government and presented to Congress giving his case for not allowing Hispanics into the country. And it was racist, but it was cloaked in science. And that's one thing we have to be careful about because these people have managed to drive the conversation.
And this has been this has been going back to slave times when they were saying, oh, well, we can just, it's better for, you wrote in your book, it's that they were saying at the time, it's better for slaves' mental health to be enslaved.
Right. Yes, certainly you're worried about the mental health of the people that you beat and rape, and
Yeah,
but
sure.
The thing is, that's true. But when you have scientists promulgating it, as did happen at that time, it actually predated slavery. But in this country, that's where we saw it first emerge. And the American School of Technology, these were all scientists who were stating these theories about how enslavement, how freedom is bad for the mental health of African Americans, as well as, of course, being bad for us. Right now, we're looking at scientists speaking for corporations. And, of course, the corporation's goal is to make money. They don't want to spend money on testing chemicals to see what kind of human interactions might be involved. They want to just put them on the market and make money. Okay, they exist to make money. But that's why we need a government who is willing to rein them in. Mm-hmm. You know, frankly, although they're both culpable, I don't blame the corporations as directly as the government, because even though they're doing wrong, they're doing what they were actually designed to do, to give money to their stockholders and make money at all costs. We know that that's a corporate animus, but the government are people that we pay and that we elect, and they should be looking out for our interests, and they're not.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have a real we have corporate fascism now. So the government is actually doing what they think they're supposed to be doing, which is allowing corporations to run rampant. But this idea of democracy is a nice dream that we once tried to make happen.
Well, the practical upshot as a government, which no matter how this government sees itself, is there to protect us, is not protecting us. They're rolling back the protections that were already put in place, and that's a really dangerous and critical problem. And you've got Trump, who appointed Scott Pruitt, who before Trump was elected, his avowed goal was to shut down the EPA.
Yeah.
So if you have him heading the EPA, we know which way that's going to go. And of course, it's not.
Quick question in a story for you. As an idealistic but already politically active freshman, I went to college and registered for the Psych 100 class, walked past a bunch of protesters, kind of ignored them, sat down, looked at the syllabus, going through all of the things, personality, Freud, Fromm, all of that, and turned to the last section, and it was race, genetics, and IQ. And the little paragraph said, here we're going to look at theories of racial superiority and inferiority as evidenced by IQ tests. Guess who my professor was? Richard Herrnstein, co-author of The Bell Curve. Was the book that reinforced these ideas of genetic differences in intelligence using an IQ test as the example. And we created one that was called the Hood IQ test that white people couldn't pass, that had the same cultural references. But my question to you has to do with a campaign that we've been working on involving the Ramapo-Lenape Nation in New Jersey, where the Ford Motor Plant dumped all kinds of paint toxins on the ground, and you were talking about lead chips, and so we have people who are living in housing on top of this dumped paint, including kids who were collecting the chips and playing with them, and in some cases eating them. And so I just wondered if you could talk about the effect of this toxicity on our indigenous people and what those kinds of paint chips could actually do to those kids.
Well, I write extensively about this in the book. Paint chips containing lead are sweet. And when young children begin moving around as toddlers, they're drawn to them and often eat them. And lead, of course, is devastatingly toxic to the brain as well as to the body. There are many, many effects on the body, but on the brain, the toxic effects can be devastating. I mean, it can easily kill a toddler to eat a few paint chips. So, of course...
So they're sweet and colorful, and they're on the floor.
And if I could finish...
Sorry.
Yeah, but if I could finish, the real question is, why are Native peoples and Hispanic peoples and African Americans more likely to live in housing where there is still lead paint on the walls? Why are they more likely to live in housing where these kind of toxins still abound? And there's a myriad of reasons, but they really boil down to confluence of factors that bar people from freedom in housing. Everything from segregation to redlining of mortgages to the abject poverty that many Native communities are kept in, keep people from moving into cleaner housing, and the government, again, is abdicating its responsibility to clean the housing up.
Mm-hmm. You talk on part 2 of the book, and by the way, we are speaking, if you're just joining us, with Harriet Washington. She's been a Shearing Fellow at the University of Nevada's Black Mountain Institute, a research fellow in medical ethics at Harvard Medical School, a senior research scholar at the National Center for Bioethics at Tuskegee University, and a visiting scholar at DePaul University College of Law. She's had fellowships at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and Stanford University. You are no joke when it comes to having the serious academic credentials that, no one can dismiss your work at all. And it's just fabulous that you were able to come on the show with us. We're talking about her new book, A Terrible Thing to Waste, Environmental Racism and Its Assault on the American Mind. In the second part of your book, you talk about what you call the brain thieves. You talked about the lead age, heavy metals, low IQ. You also talk about the rate, you talk about microbes, which is interesting. Can you, talk about that, please?
Very little attention to that. I did write an article for the American Scholar a few years ago. I called it the well curve. And I talked about the fact that in the developing world, you have a preponderance of microbes which we know lower cognition. They do it in several ways, but one really important way is that a baby spends 87% of its metabolic energy in building a brain, a very complex task that in humans takes more than 2 years. And you could argue it takes 20 years. But anyway, it's a very complex task, takes 87% of the energy, but if you're a baby living in the developing world, you are going to suffer infections, more than one. And fighting off infection is also metabolically expensive. A child cannot do both. So you end up with a lot of children whose brains have not developed properly because they have been assaulted by pathogens they're trying to grow. The same thing happens with adults. Many pathogens attack the brain, or the friendly fire from their immune system that fights off or tries to fight off pathogens will actually harm parts of the brain.
Wow.
So we have a lot of cognitive disorders, a lot of cognitive damage in the developing world ascribed to disease, and the problem is that unlike here, many of these countries don't have a vigorous public health system doing surveillance, looking for problems. These people don't have access to top-rate care, where the doctor might say, let's see what's going on here. You've got several infections here. You're battling several illnesses. So they're not really being perceived. And the problem is that these are unusual for a Western industrialized country in that we have huge swathes of the country that have very warm climate. The same warm climate that the pathogens in the developing world love is now here, and with global warming, it's only going to get worse.
Oh, well, that's terrifying. So we're speaking with Harriet Washington. She has graciously given us several copies of her book that we can offer people who are able to make a pledge to WBAI, where we are bringing you this information. I don't know, Harriet, have you been interviewed on a lot of different networks, on mainstream media and whatnot?
Yes.
Well, that's good.
Several NPR shows, I'm pretty happy about the media attention to it. Nature has done a piece. BuzzFeed. I've done a lot of publicity.
Oh, well, that's terrific. We, of course, wanted you to say, no, I haven't been on MSNBC. I haven't been on CNN. People don't really want to talk about this as much as I wish they would. But anyway, we're still glad that you're here with us on WBAI. The number to pledge is 516-620-3602, 516-620-3602. I mean, what happened in Flint basically made the news and then went away, and it's still happening. It's an unfolding crisis there. And we need to keep these things at the forefront of our minds. Our pledge drive is still in effect. For $50, you can get a copy of this particular book, A Terrible Thing to Waste, Environmental Racism and Its Assault on the American Mind. Also, we have, I believe you had a conversation once with Gary Null. Gary Null is a host here. He's, there's so much about Gary that we... everyone knows who Gary Null is, at least if you're listening to WBAI. And we have, for $200, if you're able to make a pledge at that level, you get 70 hours of conversations between Gary Null and some of the greatest minds on the planet, including Harriet Washington, who we have on here as a guest today. And that is our gift to you. It comes as a flash drive if you are able to pledge at the $200 level here on WBAI 99.5 FM. Harriet, we've come up against the end of our segment, but I think the most important part of one of the most important parts of your book is, the idea of what we can do both individually and politically to mitigate against these things. And that, of course, comes after you read this book where you arm yourself with information.
Yes, the last two chapters were prescriptive, where I told people things that they can do. It's true that it's the government that has to change. and protect us. But meanwhile, while we wait for environmental sanity, there are things you can do to help you and your family mitigate the effects of toxins, and I spell them out. And the last chapter, I talk about community organizing, because, groups will have to bring pressure to bear on the government. They're not going to do it without some encouragement. And I give examples of how to organize, how to do it correctly and efficiently. It can be complex if you don't have a map. I try to provide that map.
Well, that's what I like about WBAI is that we have, we have Gary, we have shows about health that show you how to keep yourself safe, and then we have shows that help you politically organize, stay aware. This is what's important. I don't see a lot of NPR is great. They give you, well, I don't know, but they give you information, but they don't necessarily tell you how to organize and what's happening. We just made announcements earlier in the show about activist things that you can do, especially trying to stop that pipeline by calling Governor Cuomo. These are important things. So taking action on both fronts is very important. And those last portion of this book, the third section of this book, talks all about that. Much like Shannon Watt's book talks about how to organize. It's not like you have to revolutionize your life to become a organizer. You can do the organizing and do the life that you have. And Harriet gives us tools for that in this area. Harriet Washington, thank you so much for joining us on the program, and thank you for allowing us to use some copies of your books to raise money for WBAI. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed talking with you.
You too. I hope you'll come back. This is way more than a 10-minute conversation, and I do hope you will join us again. A terrible thing to waste. Environmental racism and its assault on the American mind is yours if you are able to donate to WBAI at the $50 level. Remember, we don't have that many copies of this book. If you are able to donate at the $200 level, you will get not the book, but you'll get the flash drive with all of those conversations that Gary Null had, including one long conversation with Harriet Washington that goes far deeper than we were able to go in the last 5 minutes. And now we have to blow through our musical break because we are lucky enough to have Councilmember Ben Kallos on the show with us. Now, toxic chemicals and herbicides and pesticides like Roundup have been linked to cancer. This is a toxic chemical day on Waking Up here. And obviously, other alarming health effects have been linked to Roundup. Now, why haven't we banned them from being sprayed on our public places like parks and schools? Councilmember Ben Kallos has introduced a bill to do just that, and thank you for doing that, and thank you for being on the show with us today to talk about how to keep these chemicals off our sidewalks, out of the air we breathe, out of the parks in which we play. Again, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on Waking Up, and thanks for all the listeners who are paying attention on how to get active and fight the toxic chemicals that are in our environment.
Ben, why don't we see more people fighting against this? I mean, they're spraying Roundup with it infants.
First got elected, I was visiting a kindergarten, and these kids taught me about glyphosate and how these toxic pesticides were causing cancer. And they were on to something because it wasn't soon after that I agreed to introduce legislation for them. And the World Health Organization said that glyphosate was a probable carcinogen. We introduced legislation last term. We've now reintroduced it again as Introduction 1524. That is a key number for your listeners to know. Introduction 1524. That says they can't spray glyphosate and other toxic chemicals in our parks or by our waterways and other places that children are likely to come in contact with them.
Now, people who are concerned about mosquitoes and other weeds, I'd rather have weeds than cancer.
I would distinguish between mosquitoes and West Nile virus versus glyphosate, which is a toxic chemical that the World Health Organization believes is a carcinogen, and multiple lawsuits have shown caused lymphoma and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in a lot of parks employees. So I think there's a huge difference. And I will tell you, ever since I learned about this issue from these kindergartners, and now that I have an 18-month-old daughter, I look around parks, and my daughter is only allowed to play on grass that has dandelions. And the best part about dandelions is that you can actually pick that dandelion, and when you get to blow those seeds everywhere, I love doing it. My daughter loves doing it, and I think it's a part of childhood. But I look for those dandelions and daisies as a sign of safety for my child. And honestly, I don't see them overtaking the grass areas. In fact, I see them as a welcome addition.
Have you experienced pushback from the companies that make these products yet?
We had a hearing last term, and we did not see testimony from Monsanto. We heard overwhelming testimony from public health experts, doctors at everywhere from Mount Sinai to NYU, that this was a danger, that there wasn't some sort of toxic dose, that the safe dosage was none, and the only opposition we saw was from the city of New York, which is incredibly disappointing.
Yes, that is incredibly disappointing. Okay, so we'll get to how we as listeners and activists can help, but we just spoke with Harriet Washington about environmental racism. Which New York City communities are the most impacted by the continued use of these pesticides and herbicides?
All of them. In 2013, glyphosate was sprayed 1,365 times, and it's getting sprayed everywhere. And some people might think, oh, they only spray pesticides in green parks, but they actually spray them everywhere. If you're in a more urban park where all they have is a basketball court, you better believe that they are drenching that court in pesticides so that the weeds don't creep up through the asphalt.
What happened to mowing? I mean, okay, go ahead. Mowing seems like it wouldn't kill anyone, and it would create jobs.
And in Chicago, 90% of their parks are pesticide free, so we know we can do it. Because I think we're better than Chicago.
How did glyphosate end up in the mix anyway in the administration? When you think of a big corporation like Monsanto, I mean, I hate to suggest this, but is there any kind of campaign contribution or anything that leads this to end up in our food chain?
At the federal level, there are very few regulations. Here on the city level, I've actually passed and waiting for it to age into law some groundbreaking campaign finance rules that would change our city's elections from candidates running around getting $5,000 from people who want something to being able to run solely on small dollars, seeing every small dollar matched with taxpayer dollars at a rate of 8-1. And that's in effect for 2021. So
excellent. Thank you for that. Restoring democracy to our city.
But was Monsanto making campaign contributions?
I haven't looked into it. It wouldn't surprise me if they were making campaign contributions on the federal level.
We're speaking with Councilman Ben Kallos, who has introduced Introduction 1524 that would keep our parks from being sprayed with toxic pesticides. How is it looking? Do you have a lot of support? Can we help you by calling our own council members and telling them that we want you to support this bill?
Last time I was on WBAI, we did not have much support at all. Since I was on, we've gone from a handful of sponsors to 16 sponsors because of listeners like you calling their local elected official. If we have a moment, I'd like to read the 16 sponsors of the legislation. And if you don't hear your council member's name, please call your council member, demand that they sign on, and call for a hearing.
Yes, go on
So
ahead.
I'm a sponsor. I'm the author. It was introduced with Carlina Rivera. It's also sponsored by Helen Rosenthal, Keith Powers, Fernando Cabrera, Justin Brannon, Lori Cumbo, Donovan Richards, Antonio Reynoso, Udonis Rodriguez, Bill Perkins, Robert Holden, Mark Levine, Costa Constantinides, Barry Gudenchik, and Joseph Borelli. If you haven't heard your city council member's name, please go to council.nyc.gov, look up who your council member is, and keep calling them and emailing them until they sign on to this legislation. When we get to 34 sponsors, it forces them to have a hearing and will force the city to take a position once again.
That's wonderful. And then it will also force maybe some other media outlets to give this the coverage that it deserves. So council.nyc.gov. I also encourage people, if you did hear your council person's name on that list, and what a great list it is. These are people who you can count on, I think, for being concerned about the environment and taking the right steps, as far as I know. Introducing this bill to help keep us safe, our children safe. We just literally spoke to Harriet Washington about exactly how little of certain toxins that get in your blood that can wreak havoc. She's writing about IQ, but of course they can wreak havoc on other areas of the body as well. So, glyphosate is, we did a whole thing in the last fund drive, the Monsanto book with Mitch Cohen from the No Spray Coalition, talking about just how toxic that chemical is in very low doses. So I thank you very much. And it's great to know that Chicago already did it. It's not like, oh, we can't do this. We could do it if we have the political will.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, that was Councilmember Ben Kallos fighting against the use of Roundup in New York City. So some good news there. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. You're listening to Waking Up. I'm Julianna Forlano. Again, we are in our fund drive. I think Ben just made the biggest call, the biggest pitch, the biggest reason why folks should support WBAI. He literally said he went from 0, then he appeared on, he got the WBAI bump. He appeared on WBAI, and people got up and they got active, and now there are 16 co-sponsors of this bill. That is amazing. So we need WBAI to be on the air in order to do this.
Yeah, and it means that our listeners were warned about a problem that they were very concerned about that wouldn't have known about if it hadn't been brought to them. So it's another reason why one would want to become a member or renew their membership.
Exactly. And to help warn people who maybe cannot pledge. If you want to help people, your money goes a long way to doing that. We appreciate any amount that you can give. 516-620-3602 is the pledge number. If you're a texter, not a driver and texter, but a texter, you can text WBAI to 41444 and make your donation that way. It takes maybe 2 or 3 minutes, so you can do it this morning, hopefully. Or you can go on the internets, give the number to WBAI.org for $50, a pledge. We are able to offer you the thank you gift of the book, A Terrible Thing to Waste, Environmental Racism and Its Assault on the American Mind by Harriet Washington. What an amazing guest she is. If you have the means and you're interested, we also have a thumb drive of interviews, 70 hours of interviews that Gary Null did with people of note like Harriet and including Harriet that we can give you as a thank you gift if you're able to pledge at the $200 level. Again, the number is 516-620-3602. King, what did you think about those interviews?
I think this is the one place that you can go to get them. And I was thinking about how WBI has broken ground on environmental racism. We're the first people to talk about the trucks going through the Bronx and leading to high levels of air pollution. It was the first place to reveal that roach droppings were a large cause of lung problems within Black and Latinx communities. This is the place. This is the place to go to hear about these things. And it's always been over the last 20 years these stories have been told. And now we're hearing a new round.
And in this particular book, by the way, it's very local. So on page 10, she talks about how in South Camden, New Jersey, that's super local. Schools and playgrounds are located on the waterfront alongside heavy industries of many kinds. Almost 2/3 of the children in that neighborhood have asthma. In West Harlem, the North River Water Treatment Plant covers 8 blocks near a school. On the south side of Chicago, it's the same kind of thing. The very young brain is not just a miniature adult. They are exquisitely sensitive to environmental poisons, especially ill-timed ones. That means dismissing a tiny exposure as harmless because it's the equivalent of a drop of poison in 118 bathtubs full of water is naive. And she goes on to explain why in more detail in one of her later chapters, chapter 4. This book is just a must-have. I hope you've enjoyed our thematic program today of doing things to help you both with your own health and also doing the political work and giving you the resources to do the political work. So the action that's taking place tomorrow at noon in front of the governor's office, and also the to get these information. So give us a pledge, 516-620-3602. We have Jack Devine from our 5 p.m. show on the air with us right now, Revolutions Per Minute. Jack, what's coming up on the show tonight?
Well, first of all, just thank you for having me on for a few minutes here.
It's a pleasure.
Tonight, we're going to be talking about this weekend's this past weekend's the DSA convention that happened down in Atlanta. We're going to, have some sound from the weekend, and then we're going to discuss what that means for
Did you say
our
DSA,
organization.
like Democratic Socialists of America?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Just
That's
making
correct.
sure. Yeah.
Oh, no, thank you for clarifying for the audience. That's
I was like, is it
probably a
the
good idea.
TSA? What are they meeting about? Who's guarding the airports?
They're making sure they can waste more time for people at the airport.
Oh, yeah. So what happened at the DSA? Give us a taste.
There was a lot of things that went down, a lot of important resolutions that were passed and discussed in eco-socialist Green New Deal, on open borders, on, fighting back against the imperialist capitalist state. So, just light stuff.
Are you running? Is DSA running any candidates on national or local office?
We'll be. We've already endorsed Bernie in 2020 for president, but we also will be definitely running people across the country. The endorsement process is both tends to be local first, so our local chapters will endorse someone. Like, for example, here in New York, it happened in Queens and Upper Bronx and Manhattan first with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or with Julia Salazar, who I interviewed on RPM a month and a half ago. She was actually a member and actively engaged in organizing in the North Brooklyn DSA chapter, and then was motivated to run by her comrades, and now she is a state senator pushing things to the left in Albany.
I love the title of your show, by the way, Revolutions Per Minute. It's great.
Thank you. I don't deserve the credit for it. There was someone else came up with that great idea, but thank you.
Still wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show, and that sounds like an exciting program. 5 p.m. here on WBAI. Jack, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
And thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. 516-620-3602 is our pledge line. I mean, what other channel has a Democratic Socialists of America show?
Before it was popular.
Yeah, before it was. Oh, man. Give the number to WBAI.org is our pledge line. Text WBAI to 41444. We're not going to be here tomorrow.
I know. What are we going to do?
I'm going to listen to the show, I guess, that's going to be on in my stead. Why are we not going to be here?
Because we are in this fundraising mode, and we're trying to get people to pledge. And we talked about it before the drive came, where we were looking for buddies. And so now the time has come. And so if you're going to miss us, maybe the next time around, you'll become a buddy while we're giving you a couple of weeks' notice. It's not shame, it's encouragement.
No,
it's
yeah,
encouragement. People who are kind of cursing the radio now, they could have done something about it.
Yeah, but I also want to thank the people who did.
Oh, most definitely,
buddies.
because they probably.
Otherwise, we'd have been off today.
Yeah, we'd have been off all week. You wouldn't have heard us at all.
All month.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need your support. And if you can make your pledge in the name of waking up, that goes to show that you were listening to this, and we're the ones who convinced you to support this channel. 516-620-3602, or you can text WBAI to 41444 for a pledge of $200. You get those 70 hours, not just 70 hours of conversations with Gary Null and, people of note, including Harriet Washington, who we spoke about today. Harriet Washington is the author of A Terrible Thing to Waste, Environmental Racism and Its Assault on the American Mind. That book will be yours if you are able to give a gift of $50 today. We don't have that many copies, so make sure to get that in sooner. Don't sit on that one. Don't wait for that one.
Don't sleep on it.
Do not sleep on it. Hey, and don't forget to go in front of Cuomo's office tomorrow at noon.
633 3rd Avenue. We won't be able to remind you tomorrow, so.
Yeah, so you can write it down. That, and also don't forget to call your council person or go to council.nyc.gov to encourage your council person to sign on to Introductions 1524. And if you can't remember that, just say, hey, we don't want pesticides in our parks, in our lungs, in our children's brains. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I appreciate it. You have a great day.
grab our hand